Stephen, welcome back. We're here for the second part of the show.
Yo,
I've decided to stop trying to estimate how many fractions of the show this is going to be.
no problem, man. I feel like arguing that it has to be some percentage of a Bayesian conspiracy episode or it's not complete is just arguing by definition anyway.
Yeah, that's a silly thing that we shouldn't do.
Right.
Perfect lead-in for the LessWrong post because it is arguing by definition.
I'll give it a medium lead-in. That wasn't my best work. But
I thought it was a really good lead-in. Honestly, the worst part was that I didn't just roll with it immediately.
I got here a chicken. I'm holding a chicken. It has 2 legs, no feathers.
By the neck or by the legs?
By the legs. Most importantly, it's obviously, by definition, a human.
Oh, why so? Is it because it is featherless?
Right, and bipedal. When I look in the dictionary, that's all that there is.
Well, in that case, I'm afraid that you have to let that chicken go because it is unethical to hold a human by the legs when he's not wearing clothes.
People get mad when you do that with small humans.
Yeah.
I think the last few of these have kind of been the capstone posts of the human definition of language, or human use of words, rather, sequence.
Mhm.
But he points out rather succinctly that when people argue over definitions, they usually start with some visible, known, or at least widely believed set of characteristics. Then they pull out a dictionary, and then they point out that these characteristics fit the definition, and they conclude, well, therefore, by definition, yada, 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 atheism or religion, right?
Yeah, which is kind of besides the point because it's not the visible, known, and widely believed characteristics that are under question. As you were pointing out with the plucked chicken, it would be like saying that Socrates is bipedal and therefore he is vulnerable to hemlock. And if someone were just to say that, like, what do you mean Socrates is bipedal? Like, obviously, that is not under question. But they were saying, well, he's bipedal, and therefore, by definition, he's vulnerable to hemlock. Eliezer goes on to say that, it doesn't even matter if the individual things you're talking about are bipedalism and featherlessness. Like, if you can legitimately see that Socrates is human-shaped, you can predict his vulnerability to hemlock because the universe contains empirical clusters of similar things. If he seems humanish, then the small things that put him into that category aren't really the things that matter. The fact is that he's in that category, and that is what you guys are arguing about right now.
Right. And this is the whole point of, like, it's a reasonable probabilistic inference, right?
Yeah.
We talked, I think it was last one, about if an uploaded person should be considered a human being or a person or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of okay sneaking in the connotation of human just because that gives it this magic property where people don't want to kill it.
Yeah. Or hold it upside down while it's naked.
Exactly. But the thing is, I couldn't point to any of the usual things. I couldn't say, well, it's mostly hairless except for its head. It's got 5 fingers or whatever, 5 fingers on each of its 2 hands, etc. Because it doesn't have any of those,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It has other things that make it a person.
Yeah, it's those other things that are the things that are under question, really, which is why arguing by definition is so pointless.
Right. That's the thing. If we run into a new tribe of humans that's undiscovered, or a new tribe of featherless bipeds, we can use our ordinary inferences that we use for ourselves and each other, but
Mm-hmm.
the point is pointing to a definition isn't the useful thing there, because we have to use a separate set of criterion for assessing whether or not an uploaded person is a human, right?
Yeah. Eliezer points out that if you saw Socrates out in the field with some herbologists and they're preparing an antidote, then you can actually debate whether or not he is vulnerable to hemlock. And if someone keeps insisting he's a human and humans by definition are mortal, then it's kind of like throwing out everything, all the special information you have about Socrates, except the fact that he's human. And insisting like the correct prediction is the one you would use if the only thing you knew about him was that he was human, which is very stupid. He says it's like insisting that a coin is 50% likely to be showing heads or tails because it's a fair coin, even after you've actually looked at the coin and see that it's showing heads.
Right. As he puts that, I liked it. This is illegal under Bayesian probability.
Yeah, you can't just keep one categorization and make estimates based on that while deliberately throwing out everything else you know.
Right.
Yeah, with this newfound tribe of humans, I suppose we could assume that they are humans and make all the inferences that we make about that normally, but if we find out a special thing about them that makes them immune to hemlock, that is something that we should not throw out just because they're humans.
Yeah. Whenever I think of, arguing by definition, dictionaries tend to agree, but not on everything. It's reminiscent to me of people like pointing to the Bible and be like, see, this is the proof. But then you grab another version of the Bible and it says something different enough for there to be a substantial argument. For example, the word momentarily. Some people use it to mean for a moment or in a moment.
Yes.
And those are two different things.
That's a good point.
It's like the example that George Carlin, the stand-up comedian, gave was because the word for in a moment is presently. Momentarily means for a moment. And the example he says is that I will be there presently, and then after pausing momentarily, I'm going to kick you in the nuts.
Awesome.
That's how I always remember which one's which.
Okay.
It never comes up in real life because it's not an important thing to debate. But if it was, I'd have a good zinger for it.
That's fantastic. I always remember the Superman does good, you do well distinction.
Right.
But it's just, it seems so kind of like weird to have memorized that. I mean, I love that it's a pithy little proverb that's easy to memorize, and now I have it in my head forever. But on the other hand, like, does it matter? Like, everybody knows exactly what you mean when you're saying, I'm doing good, or I'll be there momentarily. Like, but why the pedantry there?
I mean, I bring this up because it's not entirely tangential, because a lot of the times these arguments are totally pedantic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is atheism religion? Like, if you need to squint at the dictionary to say so, who fucking cares, right? Like another good example is, like, are vegetables healthy? No, they're dead. They're healthful, right?
I guess.
But like,
that is really starting to get to my that would annoy me though if somebody was constantly going on about that.
So it's just one of those things where it's like it doesn't matter right up until it does. And so if people are going to say, well, no, we've got a human is a fertilized egg and sperm, and that's all we care about. Well, then the second, like if that's what's carved into the stone of the law, then the second we have M's, they're going to be non-human things that we can do whatever we want with. That's where the rubber meets the actual road here.
Yeah. It seems that almost all the problems we have with definitions is when a law defines something in a certain way which does not match the way things actually cluster in the world. I guess that's why definitions can matter, because laws are made out of words.
Right. And I think that's an astute point. I mean, that and like just social decorum, social mandate. So it doesn't have to be legally inscribed. It can be socially accepted, right?
Okay, yeah.
And those also have connotations. Again, like I don't know what the legal definition is of Nazi, right? Mm-hmm. But if Nazi is anyone who votes for the party that you don't vote for, then that's a bad definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Certainly, if we want to point out, like, what about those guys that worked for that guy Hitler, right?
Right.
There's a reason that, like, Call of Duty or whatever it was, Modern Warfare, like the zombies games where you'd kill Nazis. There's a reason that it was Nazi is not like Trump voters, right?
Yeah.
It'd be super fucked up if it was just people in MAGA hats, right?
Yes, it would be.
But because it's Nazis who are, by definition, worthless scum,
yes.
then it's totally okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
People like to sneak in the connotation there.
Oh, interesting. But correct. Yeah. I like that this post ended on a zinger, which I thought was really fun. Mind if I read it out?
No, please.
Said, you wouldn't feel the need to say Hinduism by definition is a religion because, well, of course Hinduism is a religion. It's not just a religion by definition. It's like an actual religion. Atheism does not resemble the central members of the religion cluster, so if it wasn't for the fact that atheism is a religion by definition, you might go around thinking that atheism wasn't a religion. That's why you've got to crush all opposition by pointing out that atheism is a religion is true by definition, because it isn't true any other way.
I love that. Yeah, the last sentence here is another good zinger here, where he says that you're probably just better off deleting the phrase by definition from your vocabulary, and always on any occasion where you might be tempted to say it in italics or followed with an exclamation mark. That's a bad idea by definition.
Well done.
I like being reminded that Eliezer is actually really funny.
When he wrote the sequences, man, these were just amazing and pithy and good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, laughing and learning at the same time is, I think the best way to do it.
I agree, which is a thing that we talked about earlier in this episode, I believe. But I don't know for sure because we're recording it tomorrow.
I suspect I bet that'll come up. Well, okay. Where do we draw the boundary between this post and the next one?
Let's draw the boundary right here and dive into the next one.
Perfect. Where to draw the boundary?
In this post, I didn't only pulled out a few things in here. The primary thing about this post is that it points out that wondering how to define a word means that you're looking at the problem the wrong way. You're searching for the mysterious essence of what is in fact a communication signal. You shouldn't ever have a word and then try to figure out how to define it. It's more about trying to figure out what things out there cluster naturally in Thingspace and summarize them, like have a handle that you can a mental handle you can use to refer to those clusters of Thingspace, rather than first being given a handle and trying to stick it into things.
Yeah.
Or stick it onto things.
That's got to stay in.
Damn it.
There's not to backtrack, but the opening example is perfect, because this is something that at various points everyone's tossed around, or at least has heard argued. Like, what is art? Just because there's a word art, and this is me quoting Yudkowsky, doesn't mean that it has a meaning floating out there in the void, which you can discover by finding the right definition. It feels that way, but it is not so. I'm reminded of 30 Rock with Jack Donaghy and Tina Fey. Without the preamble, he's like, we know what art is. It's paintings of horses. Which Ken would agree with, I think.
I was about to say, sounds like a very Ken thing to say.
But yeah, I mean, so this is more about, arguing by definition. Like, the point is, there aren't, correct me if I'm summarizing if I'm summarizing unfairly here, but it's basically like there aren't boundaries, right? Like, rather we make them, but they don't exist out there, right? This is just another way of driving home the point that, like, what I think Richard Dawkins pointed out, that it's only like an evolutionary accident that, like, the more intermediary species between us and chimps or us and our common ancestor with chimps aren't alive.
Right.
And if they were, we'd have to have like tests as to see who's human. This is like just the funny thing with evolution. Like, where did the first bird come from? Well, like, its parents had to be birds, right? Well, yes, pretty much, right? It's like there's no point in the line of evolution if you lined up every ancestor along the way as you're walking back, where you could point to this one and the one next to it and say this one's a bird and that one's not.
Yeah.
It has to be arbitrary. And
that's interesting, but also drawing a specific line is arbitrary, and yet things do cluster in Thingspace. Like, you can notice the difference between a velociraptor and a red falcon.
Right.
Like, one of them can fly and the other one can't, and that is a thing that is very important about them.
Yeah, at some point as you're walking by the line of ancestors from falcons to dinosaurs, you'll notice, this is different enough from the ones up there. I'm going to go ahead and just say these are different.
Yeah. And there may not be like any one line between a parent and its child, but there's definitely different clusters.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what Eliezer says, that the challenge is figuring out which things are similar to each other, which things are clustered together, and sometimes which things have a common cause. And he says this is a bit of an empirical question. That's basically the entirety of the post, as much as I can figure it. I like the example that he used. Do you mind if I drop it here?
I always like it when you read these verbatim, so go nuts.
Okay. He says, if you define electromagnetism to include lightning, include compasses, exclude light, and include Mesmer's animal magnetism, what we now call hypnosis, then you will have some trouble asking, how does electromagnetism work? And I skip ahead a little bit. We could say that electromagnetism is a wrong word, a boundary in Thingspace that loops around and swerves through the clusters, a cut that fails to carve reality along its natural joints. And I don't remember if this is a post which introduced this concept, but the concept of carving reality at the joints when we use language has become pretty big in rationalist space since these sequences were written. And it is this particular idea that some things do cluster together, like light and magnetism and lightning, and some things, like hypnosis, do not. And having words that correctly will group the like things together and not the unlike things together can be both a challenge and something that helps us when we're trying to make sense of the world. Like, asking how does electromagnetism work is a very difficult question if you include hypnosis.
Right. And exclude light.
Yeah.
I can't remember, you're right, if this is the phrase, if this is one that introduces that phrase, but it has worked its way into the nomenclature. I know I heard this phrase on a podcast at some point in the last 2 weeks.
Nice.
Win-Win versus Moloch, the many-headed monster that may consume us all, with Liv Boeree. I think that's how you say her last name. I remembered I heard a conversation with her on Lex Friedman's podcast like a year or so ago. But I think on this one, she said something about carving reality at the joints. To me, that's like a signal of like, oh, okay, she's read the sequences or she's sufficiently involved in the community that this is seeped in, right?
Yeah. That's the name of the podcast?
That's the name of the episode. It's on Clearer Thinking is the podcast.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, I am subscribed to Clear Thinking. I will go download that one.
It was fun. We'll put a link in the description here.
Hell yes. Did you have anything else to say about drawing a boundary?
I mean, I like his closers usually. He says that, you can't hide behind a comforting shield of correct by definition. Both extensional definitions and intentional definitions can be wrong, can fail to carve reality at the joints. Categorizing is a guessing endeavor in which you can make mistakes, so it's wise to be able to admit it from a theoretical standpoint that your definition guesses can be mistaken. Again, if this is one of those things where if you've got some stupid definition of human, then the second an edge case comes up, you're going to be just trapped into this ridiculous circumstance, whether it's believing that a miscarriage is equivalent to a murder or that an M it has no moral value, right?
Mm-hmm. And by M, that's an emulated human.
Yes, thank you. I jargon dropped without explaining.
Yeah, I'm sure most people are familiar, but it's been a while since we talked about them, so maybe the new listeners wouldn't be.
Nope, valuable.
Quick lower quality audio note here to mention that we forgot to plug the next two LessWrong posts that we're reading called Super Exponential Concept Space and Simple Words and Leave a Line of Retreat.